if you are putting work out there, if it can prompt people to ask questions or, like, oh, I'm curious to know more about what inspired this, or who the artist was, or whether you're an artist or anything in the world. Just, I know that our actions, whether it's art, whether it's just, being in the world and stuff like that, just always knowing that you're representing Christ, you're representing the church.
All right, welcome everyone to the Orthodox Christian Podcast, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Presbytera Kathryn Tussing. And for everyone who is listening or watching Presbytera, Kathryn, why don't you take a second to introduce yourself, maybe explain what that title Presbytera means, and tell us what you spend your time doing.
Hi there, thanks so much for having me. It's awesome to chat with you today. My name is Presbytera Kathryn Tussing. I also go by Pres Katie. And I am a wife to my husband, Father Steve, and I'm a mom of 4 tweens, 3 teens and 1 tween. And I'm an artist, and I spend my time making art, managing my small business. It's an Etsy shop, and taking long walks with my dog, and just sort of taking care of my family and going to church and everything. It's a busy life. It's my kids are at a very, very busy age, so lots of driving around, but yeah, that's what I do.
Wonderful. Yeah, and so Presbytera, it is sort of like the female form of
Yes.
presbyter,
Yes.
and so in
Right.
Greek, the pastor is the presbyter, and so if anyone's wondering what that Presbytera means, it means you're married to a priest.
Absolutely, yeah. Sorry, I forgot to explain that. Yes, it just means, the wife of a priest. I guess in the translation to Greek would be, presbyter is like a presbyter's wife. I don't, yeah. So it's, I know in different jurisdictions, priest wife is called different things, matushka or korea, popadia, but in Greek it's presbytera. So yeah.
Wonderful. So, did you grow up in the Orthodox Church, or was that something that you joined later in life?
Yeah. I guess now it feels like it's been part of my life, like over half of my life. So in some ways I do feel like I grew up Orthodox, but I I I was born into a Protestant family. So I was raised Protestant. And then when I was 14, that's when my dad was pursuing Orthodoxy, and he wanted us to pursue it as a family. So it came at a really interesting time in my life where it's sort of these, you're coming of age, and you're trying to make sense of your world. So it came at a really unique time in my life. Not quite a kid, not quite an adult. And so yeah, but I grew up, we would travel. My dad had always been a seeker. He grew up Catholic. My mom grew up Baptist, and when they got married, they just agreed to more or less be just Protestant. They could never, I think, because of their differences, they could never totally settle on one denomination, so to speak. But it was always a mainline Protestant denomination, and so we would sort of church hop for a while growing up, and that was hard to never. And maybe that's why later on Orthodoxy felt so wonderful to feel home somewhere. But because I never felt indoctrinated, and I was never formally catechized into one denomination. My grandfather was a Baptist pastor, and he was amazing. He was very, very. My husband and I jokingly call him a Protestant saint, but he was. He baptized my sister and I. I was 9 and she was, I think, 11 whenever we were baptized. So, my parents wanted us to grow up having a reverence for the sacraments. Even as kids, we weren't really allowed to have communion until just a little bread and grape juice until we were baptized, and that was at a little bit as an older child. But so there is definitely like a reverence for, like, hey, these things have meaning, and I think that maybe was born from both of my parents trying to make sense of their backgrounds and trying to figure out, trying to instill it in the best way they could, in raising us. And so it was really, really kind of interesting. We moved to Oregon when I was 9. So a lot happened when I was 9, but and we just settled on a Presbyterian church. So I would say that's where I spent the most time before I became Orthodox, from like age 9 to 16. But we were never formally catechized. I would never really say I was like a Presbyterian by any means. I didn't even know until way after I was Orthodox what Presbyterians actually believe. So I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. It would have been, in hindsight, I think things make a little more sense, what the Presbyterian church was like. But I think it was just sort of, my dad was sort of taking a hiatus from seeking the right church. And a lot of people that we had met when we had moved there recommended this church. So we're like, let's just go here. The kids need some stability, so we'll just go here. So so I was pretty active. Sundays were non-negotiable. Like, we always had to go to church on Sundays. Um, I always got roped into going to youth group, so that was just unavoidable. And so had a pretty normal, I guess, experience with what a lot of people my age growing up in a Protestant church might have grown up with, going to youth group and being involved and everything. But yeah, the wrench got thrown in whenever my dad started pursuing the Orthodox Church, and it was because it was such a foreign thing. It took a while, so we would go back and forth from go to the Orthodox Church one weekend, and then go to the Presbyterian Church. So that happened for about 2 years. So I guess I still was going there when I was 16, but by that point I was heavily considering the Orthodox Church, but hadn't taken the leap yet. So yeah.
Okay. And so a lot of time in the Presbyterian church prior, did you also spend time in other mainline churches like Anglican, or I guess it would be Episcopalian in the States, or Lutheran?
It was mostly like non-denominational churches. Like, they were
Oh,
never,
interesting.
yeah, non-denominational, or like we would go to my uncle's church a lot, and he was like the pastor of a community church, which is sort of just non-denominational. So um maybe we'd go to an alliance church for a little while, maybe we'd go to a house church for a little while. But like, it was just kind of interesting. Like, I just have these weird fuzzy memories of like going to different churches and always being the new kid and always kind of hating it. And like, why do we have to always, not really understanding why we were always bouncing around and everything. And so yeah, there were always kind of, I would say, maybe evangelical before evangelical became a big buzzword, like, if that's even the right way to put it. So I guess just, it was weird because by the time I went to college, I was Orthodox, and I was or on the cusp of becoming Orthodox, and I went to an evangelical college, and I didn't know any of even though I had a Protestant background, I was just like, I'm not familiar with the praise and worship. It wasn't the praise and worship sort of, I guess, Protestantism, but it also wasn't a high church Anglican. It wasn't really like, it was just sort of normal, somewhat liturgical, somewhat traditional, but nothing too strange. So if that, I don't know, I'm doing a terrible job of explaining it, but hopefully that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful. So, your dad was really curious about these different streams of Christianity, or traditions of Christianity is a better way to say it.
Yeah.
And then you were exposed to it as a 14-year-old. So there's two questions there. One is, was that just of your, like, what was driving your dad? Because that's kind of unique.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what was your experience as a 14-year-old encountering the Orthodox Church? Because I'll just give a bit more info on that question. I know a lot of people that join the Orthodox Church as adults and then raise their kids within the Orthodox Church. And the experience for the person converting as the adult is generally different. Well, obviously different, but sometimes it's a lot more positive for the adult that's converting. And then the kid sometimes is like, well, why am I here? And why are we
Yeah.
bowing down and doing these strange things? So
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
I'd be curious about that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So my dad is, I mean, he's like, full honesty, he's not Orthodox anymore, ironically. So like, that just sort of shows you, like, and I love him dearly, but like, but he's still a seeker, I would say. He's still, if that gives you any, that's always been his personality, always finding the church. I would, like, I would love for him to come back to the Orthodox Church. Obviously, I guess I'm just thankful in the end that it did bring him to the Orthodox Church. And um but I think it's his own drive, and I'm his own kind of like journey. And he's, wanting to know the love of God, wanting to know true worship, wanting to know how to experience the love of God. And I found it, but because of his own, his own journey, it's I hope he circles back. But um, yeah, so that's sort of it's really interesting. But my mom, she was just like, absolutely not. What are you talking about? We didn't have an Orthodox church in our town at all. He had to travel a lot for work, and he stumbled upon a little Orthodox bookstore 2 hours away in Eugene, Oregon, and like quite literally stumbled upon it. I think he just drove by and was like, they had a huge, beautiful mural of and it was called Way of the Pilgrim Bookstore, and it catches your eye. I think it had like a beautiful mural of like a pilgrim um, on a journey and everything like that. Looks like something that would, like an illustration that would be taken from the Way of the Pilgrim book itself. So it catches your eye, and I think he's like, "Whoa, this looks cool!" And so he he went inside and he talked to the bookstore owner, and they would convert the space into a little chapel for services. So it was really clever. It was really, really tiny church. And so he was, because he had to travel a lot, he was able to stop by the bookstore quite a bit and get more materials and talk more. I think he got to meet the priest, and over time he realized, like, I want to pursue this. And so he um, sat us all down. I think it was the summer right before school started, or like, yeah, the summer of 1996. And I was anticipating becoming a freshman in high school. And he sat us down for a family meeting. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what's this all about? Um, and he said, I'm pursuing the Orthodox Church, and I would like us to pursue it as a family. And I had no frame of reference for what he was even talking about. I'm like, what? Like, Dad, what is it now? Like, come on, just sort of annoyed at him. And again, like I had friends who were Catholic, so I was trying to, in my imagination, just sort of, figure out, like, what is it, like a Catholic church? What is it like? You know, um, I think I had seen some images of an Orthodox church in like a National Geographic or something like that. So I had some kind of really fuzzy, I know, recollections of what it might be, but I still, I'm a visual person, so I'm trying to imagine what he's even talking about. And so and my mom was not supportive at first. She's like, no, 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 and we all reacted a little bit differently. But he's like, at least I'd like you to come see what it's like. And so I think a few weeks later, we went to our first Orthodox service at this really little church, and it was really, really beautiful. Like, all he told us was, just wear long skirts and you'll be fine. And so I go, and I just felt like I was in a completely different world. And this was a very, very small community that was extremely pious. So it might even, it blew my mind because it was nothing like I'd even seen before. But I was very touched by the beauty of the worship, and um, I knew that this was, because, I guess, to backtrack a little bit, it was interesting because my dad, like, I think in a few years before that, he had been teaching our like junior high Sunday school class. It's a story I like to tell because it just helps illustrate what prompted my acceptance of the Orthodox Church later. But I remember he asked our Sunday school class, he said, like, what do you guys think that heaven is like? And, kids raised their hands. It's a big, big house with lots and lots of rooms, kind of quoting that one song by, golly, Newsboys or Audio Adrenaline. I'm not quite sure. But, it's a big mansion, and we're all playing, and we're all, it'll be kickball and football and whatever. And he's like, he just sort of stops me and he goes, no, we will be worshiping God for all of eternity. And all of us, including myself, were just like, oh, that sounds so boring. Like, what? But I knew in my mind, like, okay, if that's my reaction, then I don't know what worship is. I don't know. I don't know what it is, because I know he's right. But what I'm seeing upstairs in the sanctuary during the 45-minute service, you know, that I saw, I'm like, that's not what eternity is. And so I knew I didn't like my reaction to it, but I knew it was because I didn't know. And so it prompted a question inside of me that was, um, I think, yeah, fast forward 2 years later. And even though Orthodoxy felt very foreign, and I felt like, gee, I just want to be a normal kid. I don't really want to be different. I don't really want to be like Orthodox necessarily, but I do want to be this eventually. So I was like, this is what I want. This is where and I absolutely knew like this is true worship. So I'm like, and because of that, I knew this is where I want to be socially and everything like that. I was still very much a teenager who's like, again, like, I don't want to be different. I don't really know how to tell my friends this is what we're pursuing as a family. It's a little bit embarrassing. It's a little bit, but I knew that it was right, and I knew that it was just so beautiful, and so I definitely felt convicted, and I definitely felt like I was maybe seeing my future and stuff like that. But um, I didn't know. It was still so new, though. I didn't know what it felt like. There wasn't anything. Sure, we had Hotmail and we had a few things, rudimentary internet at the time, but there is just nothing like the resources that we have now that are so you can find a community almost instantly, like wherever you go online, that helps you feel less alone or helps you like have questions and stuff like that. But which has its downsides too. But I think that but it made it a very unique experience. Could feel very isolating because again we were traveling 2 hours every other weekend to go to the Orthodox church. And so I couldn't even tell my friend, if I even tried to describe to my friends what we were doing, it was just like, I can't even give them a point of reference. Like, for all they know, I'm going to they have no idea. So it just felt, for a public school kid who, you know, uh, it was a weird thing to go through, but in the best possible way, but not without its challenges for sure. Yeah.
Right, right. And so from the day that you first encountered the Orthodox Church to the day that you like joined,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was as a family or individually, but what was that journey like?
Yeah. So it took 5 years, honestly. It we were going to little church and going back and forth, and after about it took me about a year to realize, because that back and forth side by side comparison of like 1 week at the Presbyterian church, 1 week at the Orthodox church, and after about like a year of that, it became pretty apparent to me. Um, just like seeing that side by side comparison, like, oh, this is the truth, like not just in worship but in practice and everything like that. It just became more and more convincing for me. Like, I remember that the Presbyterian service would end and I'd be like, that's it, that's all there is, um and feeling the tangibly the fullness of the Orthodox church more and more. So that was yeah, for 2 years, and then like another 2 years of just, I think, just pursuing it and reading, and we still weren't living close to it though, so we were very limited in how involved we could be. And the priest at the church, Father David, I really credit him. I don't see this as much. I don't know if this is very unique to my dad's situation, but I think he told my dad, like, my dad was very zealous, very fervent. He wanted to join yesterday. He wanted to join as soon as possible. And Father David told him, run with patience. Just be patient, because, and wait for your family. And again, that's very unique. I don't even see that really advised to many people today, which is fine. It works out for a lot of people, but I'm very, very, to this day, I'm so thankful to Father David for having that wisdom and maybe foresight to say this could really hurt your family if you forge on ahead without them. So just run with patience and wait for your family. So so he did. So they were taking their time, and I think he knew that it wouldn't be until we were able to actually live close to an Orthodox church and be plugged in to the community and the life cycle of the church, that that would be optimal. So he waited, and my parents were planning on moving to Portland anyway, after I graduated. So they moved to Portland after I graduated. I was going to school near Portland at the George Fox University, a Christian college. And so for the first time, I was able to go to an Orthodox church every single weekend. And because of that, my parents moved a few months later, so I was there first in Portland, going regularly. And my new priest, Father Theodore, was just like, you've been pursuing this for 5 years. We'll just go ahead and bring you into the church. We'll chrismate you. And so it was January of 2002. I think it was, yeah, fall. Whenever I started college, he made me a catechumen, and then just a few months later, I was chrismated, because he's like, you've been learning for a long time now. So sort of the long wind up and the fast pitch. So that's sort of how it went for me. So January, I think the eve of Theophany, I was brought into the church, and I did come in by myself, because my parents were still they had like only just moved to Portland, and they were still getting acclimated, but they were brought in just a few months later at Pascha. And then later on, my older sister became Orthodox. So we were trying to pursue it as a family, but even then, I think I'm very thankful. There was some allowance for our different situations or different personalities. Like, there was never a huge expectation of like, we all have to do this all at the exact same time. So I'm very grateful my parents trusted God with that. And that, because I think that, nobody really wants to be, especially a teenager, doesn't want to be pressured into things, and they want to make sure that they're doing it for the right reasons and stuff. Um, so it worked out well, and eventually within the year we were all brought into the church. And so yeah, it was, and we were all able to go to the same church, actually, which was really nice, since my parents were in Portland then and stuff. But yeah.
So, if you had to summarize the reasons why you joined the Orthodox Church, you mentioned this aspect of fullness that you experienced in Orthodoxy, especially in that year or so when you were comparing the two different liturgies, like the Presbyterian liturgy versus the Orthodox liturgy. So, I'd be curious to hear what your attraction to Orthodoxy was, or how it had a fullness, like if you could specify that.
Yeah. I just remember, like, our Father David, the priest in Eugene, as I was learning about Orthodoxy, him saying that we have to live Sunday to Sunday, basically, from one in whether we're preparing for Sunday or, you know, feeding off of the grace from the last Sunday. Like, it's like preparing for the Eucharist, preparing our hearts, and then this beautiful cycle. And I had never heard it explained like that before. For me, it was like, you kind of have, before that, it was like, okay, my life is compartmentalized. I've got my school life with my friends. I've got, everything. And then church is kind of a little secret that you go to on the weekend because you have to, and stuff like that. But I did know that I wanted to be challenged in my faith. I did know that, like, it wasn't good to hide your faith. It wasn't good to so I knew that I wanted to be challenged. And I just felt like, but it can be kind of tricky sometimes whenever sometimes when you're Protestant, it's like, well, what do you need to be challenged for? You're saved already. You're fine. Like, you don't really need to do anything. And I'm like, for some reason, that it's not that I obviously don't believe that God can save. Obviously I do, but that never really sat well with me for some reason. I was just like, I don't know why I don't, like, I don't really, I mean, it's pretty, I don't know. It just seems like that's it. Like, you just sort of, I don't know, like, I it didn't make sense to me in my brain for some reason. Just like, I don't really think that's it. But everyone's telling me that it's fine. I'm saved. It's no big deal. So it's just like, okay, well, I guess I don't have to do anything. But with Orthodoxy, it just made way more sense with, like, the life of the church, and being engaged with it, the life of repentance, in the way that the church calendar reinforces that with the cycles of Lent, and with seasons of preparation, like for Advent the Nativity. And, like, it just made the world make sense. Like, it just made kind of these little components of Christianity that I grew up with. You hear about Pentecost, but kind of, or these other significant things that happen in the gospel, but, like, they're kind of like no context. Like, these is a nice Sunday school topic or a sermon topic, but, like, kind of floating around. And, like, but with Orthodoxy, it felt like everything was connected. It just made sense in the life of the church, and the life of the feasts that we celebrate, and like the Annunciation wasn't something that you just preached on a random July Sunday. It was like, no, the Feast of the Annunciation is March 25th. That's always like, it just made everything make sense, like, oh, these. So I think that in so many ways, it just made sense to me. And the worship, just the true worship, and that's fitting, I think, of God, and reverent, and truly holy, and seeing the way that the Orthodox people that I had met, live their lives just completely for God. And there's so much beauty in their life, and so much humility and joy and everything. So I just felt like there wasn't any pretense. There wasn't any, and there's still people who have their normal flaws and everything like that. But I was really inspired by the way that they were living their life for God, and it wasn't just a Sunday thing. It was a everyday thing. And so they say that in the Protestant church, but I didn't know what that looked like. So I think that Orthodoxy really just gave the fullness of examples of what that could be like and stuff. So yeah, yeah,
Okay, so I'm gonna summarize, or try to summarize, and you can
yeah.
let me
Go
know if
for
it's
it. Sorry,
accurate.
that's
But
uh,
it sounds like the fullness that you experienced was an integration. And so the integration had two aspects. One aspect was that what was being preached and spoken about on Sunday was integrated with people's day-to-day lives in terms of having a calendar that they're following with different seasons of feasting and fasting and spiritual disciplines that allowed them to work out their salvation rather than it being a one and done event. It is something that's unfolding throughout your life, and you're
yeah,
continuing to get better at and get closer to God, hopefully. And
yeah,
then there's the other aspect, which is just in terms of maybe the theology of the church or what's being spoken about. There is actually this whole context that's nested within, in terms of, I mean, I kind of mentioned the calendar already, but that those things do have sort of a narrative arc to them that makes sense within
yeah.
Orthodoxy. You're not just dropped into the middle of the story without the beginning and the middle and the end. And that's,
Right.
is
Yeah.
that an accurate summary for you?
Yeah, I'd say so. And yeah, absolutely. The Just the integration, and the beauty and the fullness, and it and seeing everything. People will, like, not just talking the talk but walking the walk as well, and stuff like that. And so I think that was all. The people, the everything, the theology, just everything made sense. Like, I sort of always, and I've met some people like that, who have converted to Orthodoxy. They're like, for some reason, I always believe this, but it was never really articulated. It was never really like, but you're sort of, if you grow up in a different tradition, you're like, okay, I just sort of have to accept whatever I'm given. But then when you find Orthodoxy, you're like, this is what makes sense. Like, yes, this is what I think in my heart of hearts, like, believe, but it just resounded so strongly with everything. So and I apologize, I'm not super good at articulating it myself, but it sort of felt like, I know a lot of people say it just feels like home. When I came through, when I came to the Orthodox Church, I just felt like it was home. And even though for me it was a little bit longer for it to feel like home, I can absolutely I absolutely agree with that statement. Just like, no, it just feels like home. So yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I'll run another thing by you just so you can let me know what you think of it. But it does really sound like if you're writing something, if you're researching something, you come up with a thesis, and the thesis organizes all the data that's underneath it, and it draws
Hmm.
it up into itself. And so a good thesis will drop all the data accurately. And if you know the thesis, you're able to make sense of all the little parts. And so it
Hmm.
kind of sounds similar in that within Orthodoxy, it is the thesis, as it were, or it's like, I mean, Orthodoxy itself actually isn't the thesis. Christ is the thesis, but
Sure, right, yeah.
Orthodoxy preserves the gospel of Christ that
Hmm.
makes sense of all little aspects and bits of Christianity, which I think in other traditions, not to sound antagonistic, but I think it can feel somewhat helter skelter, or like, well, how do these things actually connect and get drawn together? And so I
Right.
think that that's kind of the fragmentation that you're referencing.
Yeah, yeah. Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah. It just, um even an example with Christmas coming up, it's like, oh, so now, before I was Orthodox, it was like, oh, we like Mary now. She's nice now. It's okay. We can put her on a Christmas card now, and she's okay now. But if we visit grandma, and my Catholic grandma, and she has, an image of the Madonna or the Virgin Mary, then, well, wait, it's not really good. But I'm like, well, why is it okay at Christmas, but it's not okay like every single day? But it's like, it just didn't really make sense. But like overall, it's like, oh no, it's okay. Mary's okay right now, and we kind of squish in the Annunciation and Christmas all at once around, once Christmas rolls around. But it's like, no, so it just, I guess it's one, yeah, example of the fragmentation sometimes, just like, so when is she good, and when is, like, but yeah, and she's just one example of um the thing that it was wonderful to learn more about her, and just get the fullness of, like, and just, like we treat her with reverence, and she's not just Mary. She's not just, somebody we pull out for Christmas, and she's not just a vessel, an empty vessel that, Christ came through. And, oh, it could have been anybody. It could have, like, I remember growing up, sometimes you sort of muse, oh, it could have been me. Like, what if that girl had been me? Oh my gosh, but it's like, no, I love how Orthodoxy is like, absolutely not. Just like, no, like, she was she was chosen by God because she was really special, and we can look to her as um inspiring. She can inspire us in our Christian faith because she was the first Christian. She was the first one to literally accept Christ, physically and spiritually and everything. So it's like, and so it took these concepts that felt kind of, yeah, like incongruent, and just really like solidified it and made sense. Like, oh, okay, this is really beautiful. So yeah, just to give one small example of a small but important example of where it didn't make sense before, but where it really made sense afterwards. And that's just one example of many different things. So yeah, yeah.
Totally. Totally. Well, and it's interesting too, like if you grow up Protestant and you're reading scripture, the interpretation of scripture that you're carrying with you is often invisible because it becomes so second nature. And then when you join the Orthodox Church and you start to read scripture again, and like if some years pass by, what's
Yeah,
really fascinating to me is like around the devotion to the Theotokos or the Virgin Mary, that it seems as a Protestant that there's nothing in scripture itself that would point in that direction. But actually
yeah,
in St. Luke's gospel, I mean, it talks a lot about Mary
it
in the beginning
does.
and about
Yeah,
all generations shall call me blessed. Like that's in her
right,
song. And
right,
also that when the angel comes to her, it's like, hail you who are full of grace. And so there's
right.
all these things that are like very specific to the person of Mary in St. Luke's gospel that I
Mm-hmm.
think when you again when you don't have that thesis, it's hard to actually integrate those aspects, and so they inadvertently get rejected, and then it seems odd when the Orthodox are like, well, worshiping Mary, not really, but honoring
Right.
her and venerating her. But
Yeah.
I think that actually it's a very natural progression there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Mm,
So
yeah.
was art something that also drew you in? Because I know that you got like an art business and you're very
Yeah.
much interested in
Yeah.
that avenue. And within the
Mhm.
Orthodox Church, you are confronted when you go in with all these images. So is that
Right.
something as well?
Yeah. I think that was, yeah, that was a huge draw for me, just seeing, like, again, as a visual person. Like, I'd done art all my life. Ever since I was 3, I would say, I want to be an artist. I want to be an artist. And so, like, that was really important to me. And I majored in art in college. And so I think it was a draw for me to see that this was a visually just such a stunning church. Even that little chapel, like, they really, really had some beautiful icons. They really took it. And actually, so they went from, during our early years there, the chapel, they bought a little bit of property, and they built a church from the ground up. And my dad and I would go up sometimes just to help out. I think, I probably only went up once or twice, but there was a monk who was doing some paintings, not icon paintings, but like, not icons, but just like some of the periphery details. And it was very kind of him. He allowed me to, even though I wasn't even Orthodox yet, but he allowed me to help out with some of that. And I think, you know, knowing that there is a place for art, knowing that there is a place for beautiful, beautiful art, and not just like, oh, I don't know, on a PowerPoint or just on a banner or something like that. It's like seeing that the handiwork of like real people and the craftsmanship, um, and just beauty everywhere, and the way that it involved parishioners, whether it's, a young inquirer getting to help out with something, with some details on a painting, or whether it's, a parishioner who helps out make vestments or something like that. Like there is, or, my dad helping with the carpentry of the church or things like that, or and seeing others pitch in and seeing this, grow from the ground up, literally. It's just like, I think that was like, oh, it's not just a remote outsourced thing that, um, I mean, a lot of modern churches they have to be practically, that's fine, but there's so much human craftsmanship involved that, it's really beautiful to see. So I think that you definitely feel a connectedness. It's not like a removed outsourcers, and it brings a lot of warmth. So, I'm sure as a young kid, as an artistic young kid, that was a huge, I don't think of it now, but now that you mention it, it probably was a huge draw for me to, visually to be drawn in, and also to, uh, just feel like, it's really amazing to see that it's included in the tradition, in, centuries and centuries of liturgical art and things like that. So, yeah, I think that was really wonderful to see. But yeah. Hmm.
And I know that just from reading your biography on your website, that you do make an effort to integrate your faith with the work that you're doing.
Hmm.
Not in, I don't think, just like a beating people over the head with it, or a propaganda kind of way where you're forcing it and it's
Hmm.
artificial. It seems like a natural integration that you're aiming for. So, could you speak on that? Because I think that a lot of people aren't obviously explicitly connected with the church and the work that they're performing, but they want their work to be informed by their faith. And so,
Yeah.
have you found ways that um, might be helpful for other people to connect their faith with what they're doing on a day to day basis?
Yeah. Yeah. Like just in general, like just how can we? I think. Well, yeah. I think that like when you when you put your faith first in anything that you do, just knowing that, I think people are often trying to connect the dots. Like, so if you are putting work out there, if it can prompt people to ask questions, or like, oh, I'm curious to know more about what inspired this, or who the artist was, or whether you're an artist or anything in the world. Just, I know that our actions, whether it's art, whether it's just, being in the world and stuff like that, just always knowing that you're representing Christ, you're representing the church, you're representing, you always want to be a witness. I think just never pass up on an opportunity, I think, um to be a witness, or at least, know that even if I do silly stuff or whatever, I always just try to keep it in the context of um just know that, just try not to be irreverent, try not to push it. Just try not to push it, because it can really, you don't want to just cause anybody to stumble. So I think just trying to conduct yourself in a way that can be honoring to God, and, um whether it's artistic, whether it's secular work, anything. It's just like, just know that, I think it stands out whenever you really try to put out good work, really try to work hard. Sorry, I just can't get this angle. um, but just when you're just work hard and you try to put out something beautiful, and, I think that people notice that, and people sometimes want to know more. Like, I'd like to know more about, uh, you know who this person is, or I want to see more of their work. So, um, I hope that explains, I don't know, a little bit of what I try to put out with my art. And yeah, just whatever is good, whatever is holy, or, meditate on these things,
Hmm.
whatever is
Hmm.
pure. And I think that that's, yeah, I think people want that. I think people really notice it, especially these days. Like, um, they notice it more and more when something can be, I don't know. So just try to focus on creating beautiful things and glorifying God, and trying to be a witness, so that if people do try to make the connections, it might prompt them to ask more questions, or prompt them to ask, or, you know, yeah, yeah, look up your website, or look something like, what's this person about? I want to know more about who they are. So and then just pointing that to Christ and saying it's really about Christ. It's not even about me. So, yeah, and I think it's important to, as Orthodox Christians, just, I guess, maybe a change of subject. I'm not sure. Feel free to rein me back in if I am getting too off topic, but I think it's important to, if you're on, like, in whatever you do, just showing like it's okay to be a normal Orthodox, like a normal person, and to be like, but obviously you're putting Christ first, and you're strive to. We always strive to. I'm not saying I always do, but like striving to put Christ first. But like he also gave us different personalities, so it's okay to be who we are. We don't have to, once we become Orthodox, like change our personality, change who we are. We certainly have sins that we need to work on and everything like that, but just knowing, like, just try to be comfortable being yourself and trying to share what you have, your unique perspective with the world, whether it's, again, through art, whether it's through whatever work that you're doing. Just trying to, he takes us as lumps of clay, and he forms us, and we participate in that by trying to bring the glory and beauty back to him. So if that makes any sense. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah, yeah. And I'll try to again summarize and loop in a
Please feel
few
free.
other
Yeah.
ideas because I thought it was interesting that you speak about being a witness and that is a martyr, and it's the same word.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because that relates in the sense to how someone is living, because it was the first Christians and thereafter, a lot of them were actually killed for their faith, but it was in that process that they witnessed to Christ because of the manner in which they lived. And so I
Right.
think that if we're able to live in a particular way, it
Mhm.
does witness to Christ. And that if we're able to do things that are good and true and beautiful, that these things participate in God. And so they naturally lead towards God. And
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
is always important, I think, to be able to also say words about Christ and not
Absolutely.
just
Yeah.
be passive. But
Right.
I do
Right.
think that like truth is its own, it doesn't need a defense. I think St. Augustine said that like truth is a lion, it doesn't need to be defended. It'll
Yeah.
essentially defend itself because the world is oriented around truth. And so if you're acting in a truthful way, if you're acting in a beautiful and a good way,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like in terms of convincing people or showing that this is a good path to live. It does seem similar to like soccer players or football players or anyone else. Like they don't go around evangelizing saying we need more people to play soccer, why don't you come on down. It's just that they actually do their craft really well, and
Yeah.
that in the process of performing their craft really well, it is attractive because people
Oh,
are uh, naturally wired to be connected to those things. So I
right.
think that if people are in their different walks of life and able to just execute in the
Mhm.
sense of like doing it really well, that'll be a great way to integrate their faith and their work, which is
Right.
that sort of an accurate summary of what you were
Yeah,
saying?
absolutely. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's a good summary of, I think, if you're doing, yeah, and hopefully my art reflects something that, I mean, I do a lot of like outright Orthodox art, or, Orthodox inspired art. And so that right there is, hopefully is somewhat glorifying to God, or, a nice offering. But yeah, it's, and just the way we live our lives. And yeah, I think of your example of, the soccer players, or of even the martyrs. Some of them inspired other people, to witnesses of their like, during their martyrdom, they inspired bystanders to just like hop into the, yeah, experience martyrdom too at the very last second, because they were so moved by their love for God. And there's so many accounts of people who were bystanders during a martyrdom, and just went up to be slaughtered as well, because they're like, and without even being like baptized, without even being like, that's very, very unique, very, but it just goes to show that, I think, just, what's that? I know it's a Catholic saying, or he was a Catholic saint, but I think Saint Francis said, preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words. And there's certainly a time and place for words. Some people just, that's what they love. Words are what really help them, and so that's wonderful and great and stuff like that. So everybody needs something a little different, and I'm very thankful that we have so many different people with so many different gifts who can offer those things. Um, so yeah, yeah. Anyway.
Yes, yeah, yeah, and I also think that your emphasis on being natural or being like who you are is
Hmm.
really nice as well. I mean, and if we want to loop that in with the martyr thing, it's definitely possible because I think it
Right.
was Saint Ignatius of Antioch who's like one of the original martyrs. He
Yeah.
said something like, "I want to be a human being,"
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
he's on his way to being martyred.
Oh,
And so
wow.
there's this notion that in the martyrdom he's actually going to become fully human
Oh, yeah.
because there's degrees of humanity and we can be closer
Yeah.
to what it means or further away from what it means. So
Absolutely.
I think that idea of being who you are called to be
Yeah.
is like super, super ancient. And
Yeah.
I mean, what sometimes I want to phrase this question carefully, but sometimes it seems like there is a temptation for some people that are joining Orthodoxy or interested in Orthodoxy to become anti-Western
Mm-hmm.
and to
Hmm.
reject what like
Yeah.
everything that they've been
Sure.
brought up with.
Right. Right.
What would be your advice
Yeah.
or take on that? How do you think someone could navigate that?
Right. I think there's a normal process that people go through. I've seen so many people convert since my own conversion, and you do, and I went through it too, and I see other friends go through it or parishioners now, and there's um, a knee jerk reaction, and I think it's part of like almost like a 2-year old who's like, I want to, like, don't tell me what to do, I want to do it independently, don't tell, and it's like almost like this, just like a human development, the spiritual development. That's like, I'm trying to figure this out, and um and I'm trying to make sense of my world. And right now, I just can't have those influences because all I know right now is that it wasn't it wasn't true, and I just haven't learned how to. Um, Sometimes it takes a little more time and a little more perspective to be able to look back and be like, you know what, like like some of these things that I grew up with are actually really special to me. And I don't even know if I would have had faith in God as much as I did that led me to the Orthodox Church if I hadn't had those things. So I think sometimes it can just take a while to develop an appreciation for um, the things that nurtured your faith, maybe before you were Orthodox, the things that. Um, I think there's a natural, like, initial knee jerk reaction at first, like, get me away from that. And then after a while, there can be a softening of just like recognizing, like, glory to God, like those hymns that my grandma sang, the Protestant hymns, some of them are actually really beautiful and they'll always remind me of her. And I remember how devoted she was and her love for God when she sang them. So I might have laughed at them at first when I first became Orthodox. I might have made fun of them or whatever, but like, or any example. But so you sort of have this other stage where you might have some softening toward that and some appreciation, which I think is all good. But sometimes in the convert process later on, there can be almost a temptation for nostalgia, where it's like, oh gosh, Orthodoxy sometimes just feels so complicated. I miss those simple days before. And I'm just speaking completely from a Protestant position. I'm sure forgive me, I know there's many other people who are coming from different backgrounds. But I guess you can have nostalgia for anything, just like, we can think Orthodoxy, complicated. Everything else was so much simpler beforehand. So, and with the example of, Protestantism, like, man, maybe I should man, it was just so easy. Maybe I should just, but I think it's always so important to just try to hold them in balance. Like, just because, um, we can look back and appreciate things, just knowing like we still have the fullness of the faith, and we can be thankful that they led us to, the Orthodox Church, and holding those, just being able to be a little bit comfortable with a little bit of paradox, like, and it doesn't mean, like, nothing contradictory to our faith, and always knowing that, like, just being like, yeah, you know, uh, having a little bit, yeah, being able to have a little bit of being okay with a little bit of paradox, and like, so I've just seen it in my own life as a convert. I've seen other converts, and it's just like, but the church has the fullness. It has the sacraments that heal us. It has Christ who heals us, and it's just, yes, Christ who heals us, and all the medicine that he offers in the sacraments he doesn't leave us without nothing. He doesn't say, I want to heal you, and then not leave us with the tools needed. Um, so my encouragement would just be, like, just take your time, just like stick with it. And I had the unique advantage of, having to wait 5 years to be Orthodox. So I think that um, that was just our situation. It was just unique, and I wouldn't say everybody has to do it. Therefore, but I know in the early church, the catechumenate time was a long time, like 2 years. It could be 5 years. It could be 7 years. I mean, it was just like, or people who weren't even allowed to do the Jesus prayer until they had been Orthodox for like a number of years and stuff. And it wasn't to be exclusive. It wasn't to be I'm better than you or anything. It was just to show like the church in its wisdom was just like, I want to make sure that you're absolutely ready because there's so much grace here. And if you're not prepared for this grace, it could do more harm than good. And we see examples of that in the gospel where, people received unworthily and were struck down. And none of these things are here to, tell you I'm better than you. I'm more advanced than you. But it's just like, um, if we try to rush ahead too quickly, that can be harmful to us. But if we can err on the side of caution and just be patient and um, just know that the depths of orthodoxy are so great, and it's not a sprint. It's not, I'm Orthodox. I need to go online and order as many icons now as possible. I need, there's so many things that are available to us now that in the 90s, and obviously way before that too, but just like from my perspective, like, like you didn't even have that. You went to the Orthodox church if if it was in your town, you were lucky, or you had to go 2 hours and maybe you can get one or two icons or, a book or something like that. But then, you just read what your priest told you to read. There wasn't any choice really. It's like, I want you to read this and that's it. And you're like, okay. He wasn't going to, and still priests are still like that. They're not going to recommend you anything that's in the same vein of advancing too far before you're even ready. It's like um, I don't know. So I'm getting all jumbled up with my references, but I think my advice would be appreciate. There's a time to appreciate where you've come from, and developmentally, I think sometimes there is that initial like knee-jerk reaction, like I don't want everything anti-Western and stuff like that. But I think that with time, you realize, nothing's going to make me Greek. Nothing's going to make me Russian. Like I am who I am. So it's like, and I absolutely appreciate the traditions that have been brought, but I am a Western person. So I really can't hate it as much as I want. So there's a reality that you do have to, again, that uncomfortable paradox, but it's like, I am though. And so it's like, just trying to keep the focus on Christ though, and knowing that stay in the church and don't panic too much if you have these thoughts or feelings, and just know that you're in the right place, you're home, and it's a process, and it's yeah. So I apologize, I'm totally rambling, but I hope that makes a little bit of sense of take it slow and steady, and the depths of which will continue through eternity. Like we just keep, knowing the depths of God more and more and more and more. It's just beautiful to know that there's no race. Like, the depths of God and his love are so great that, um, yeah, just take your time. So feel free to cut any of that if it's way too convoluted. Like you need to edit or anything, but, or if you need to, if I can clarify anything, please feel free to ask.
Well, I like your positive interpretation of essentially overcaution
Yeah.
when people might be coming in because there may be certain aspects of their past that they are letting go of, which is
Yeah.
normal. And then there might just be a sense of being overly cautious at first to say, well, I'm not sure what's the good stuff and what's the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
just going to let it all go. I'm going to really go on this side. And then
Mhm.
years later, able to reevaluate and reintegrate with some of the things that were beneficial and
Yeah.
appreciate those. So I like that emphasis. So when you joined the Orthodox Church, were there certain challenges either initially or along the road that you had to overcome?
Yeah. Like I think my biggest challenge, like I know it sounds a little, it's not super deep, but I think a challenge for me was, just as a teenager, my friends, and like um I again, if you it's just not a cool thing to be involved, it's not a cool thing to be interested in your faith. It's not I had these friends since third and fourth grade. Like they were like my world pretty much and stuff. And so it was very, very hard to and my parents didn't agree about it. It took them quite a while to even agree to pursue the Orthodox Church together. They were at odds for a while, and so it was very hard to even articulate, like, like my parents, and thanks be to God, my parents are still together. My mom is, still Orthodox, going strong. My siblings are, and I'm very, very, very thankful. But at the time, it was just like, it wasn't easy, and so um, there's no way to articulate that to my friends. Like, my parents are fighting about the Orthodox Church, and my dad wants me to become Orthodox. And they're like, "Oh, you want to talk about boys?" Or, we want to, like, we're going to the football game on Friday night, or, what are you wearing tomorrow? Things like that. Just like, and they're at an age where they want nothing to do with anything, their faith, and they're starting to question their own. Some of them grew up Catholic, some of them are atheists, but the ones who had faith were, they're starting to question, and that's pretty normal and stuff like that. But so I think it was very isolating. I would say, in a nutshell, it was very isolating to, and I did, even though I didn't want to compartmentalize my life, I still felt like I had to do that, because it was like, well, Orthodoxy is 2 hours away, and it's, something I do, read about in private, but like, I'm not going to bother, and I thought as a young girl, I'm like, I'm never going to meet anybody. I'm never going to marry anybody who's Orthodox. There's no Orthodox. It's like, so I just was like, and I think it was right before 2000, and the year 2000. I mean, obviously it was 96. So it was getting closer and closer to Y2K. And I was like, in my mind, like, I thought the world was going to end. So that was another challenge. So I'm like, I just didn't think I had a future and stuff like that. So there were other weird things going on in the world that made being a teenager, like, not super easy, but I'm very thankful that the Orthodox Church was still there, and it was like, it was a steady influence in my life, and it became an increasingly influential thing in my life as I um, went through high school and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I'd say the isolation. So my heart goes out to anybody who's, a teenager whose family is exploring Orthodoxy, or if you live far from an Orthodox church, like, man, I sympathize with you. I know that's really hard. And or like, if your spouse is, maybe you're, not interested in Orthodoxy, but your spouse is gung ho, guns blazing, they want to become Orthodox, and you're just like, can you stop and explain some things to me? And they're like, so it's just like, it's just, I feel like our family was hit with a lot of those different aspects, and at a young age, it was, I felt like I developed a lot of empathy for, now I've developed a lot of empathy for people in those situations and stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, Orthodoxy can be really, Orthodoxy at that time, especially, but again, before the internet, before there was communities you could even find online, like, it could be pretty isolating and stuff like that. But glory to God, there was enough for me to know that it was the right path. Like, it was, increasingly became more and more aware of that. So I can't even really attribute that to anything other than God. I glory to God. So yeah, but I'm very thankful. Mhm.
Would you have any tips or tricks for someone who finds themselves in that kind of situation? Plus, more generally, if someone is exploring Orthodoxy in their own right,
Mhm.
would you have any advice for that person?
Like, whether you're somebody whose family member is pursuing Orthodoxy and you're not really ready for it, or whether
Yeah.
you're yourself. Yeah. I think, like, if anybody, like, if you're pursuing Orthodoxy and your family's not ready, just, I can't stress, I just have to repeat what our first priest, Father David, said, and that's just run with patience. If you can, like, the Orthodox Church, it isn't going anywhere. And, and if it can just help your family, even just a little bit, to take it a little bit slower. I know that's so um, I know that's so different from what we see now. People who come in like that, and that's great. That's really fine. It's, but if you have any family members who might just benefit from a little bit more sensitivity, a little bit more, um, um, and that can just mean the world to them, and it might make the difference in their life whether they want to pursue the church or not. It absolutely 100% could. So I only say that if people are on the fence of, I really want to, I don't know if I should wait or if I should just go ahead and speed ahead. But if there's any influence I can have on you, it's just like, know that it might make the world of difference to one of your kids. It might, whether they become Orthodox or not, it just might be like, I appreciate the sensitivity, and I appreciate that they cared about how I felt. And I'm happy they're Orthodox now, and I want to be Orthodox too, or I might not be, but that can speak the love of Christ more than anything in the end. So if you're if you're a teenager in the situation where you want to become Orthodox, but you're just feeling like, I don't know how to, I don't know how to communicate this with my friends. I feel alone in this because how many other teenagers have to go through this? I would just see if you can, I don't, just see if you can talk to some, I don't know, just make even just one or two acquaintances at church of people who you admire and feel like you could trust, and developing even just like just some kind of friendship with them. And one thing that helped me too in those years, I had this book about, it's my husband. Oh, the daily readings of this book got me through high school, like honestly. And it's by Light and Life Publishing. I don't even think it's like necessarily available anymore. Daily readings from the writings of St. John Chrysostom. And each day had just a little excerpt on, like, a little from one of his sermons and stuff like that. But there's all these different topics about, just um, how to be a Christian, honestly, how to be a Christian. And these things, I'd go to school, have my normal day, be with my friends and stuff like that. But then kind of right before bed in the dark, I would sort of look at this, and it would just fortify me. So I know we just celebrated the feast day of St. John Chrysostom, and I know people might think, well, he's more of a academic saint. But I'm like, no, I personally just feel like so thankful that I feel like he guided me through those years of trying to figure out Orthodoxy, trying to learn what it means to be a Christian, an Orthodox Christian especially. This is by Father Anthony Cagnaris of blessed memory, and I don't know if you're familiar with him or his works, but he was made such a point to try to get Orthodox materials out in the early days of, before there was really anything even available in English. And he really wanted to make sure that these things were accessible and readable, and I think all of his writings and his sayings were just always shown with God's love. Like, he just wanted to just let people know that. So if you ever if you ever come across something by Father Anthony Cagnaris, it's very simple. It's not, but it's just so good. And he had such a heart for evangelizing in America before it was what it is today and stuff like that. So Light and Life Publishing, it's not around anymore, I don't think, but a lot of really good titles. So, but this got me through. If you can even just find a little devotional, sorry, this angle is so weird. It's like reverse, but not. Okay, there we go. But if you can find something like that can get you through each day at night, reading your Bible, or reading the lives of the saints. I know there's some wonderful calendars now that reading the lectionary, like those are awesome tools just to stay connected each day, and learning a little bit more about the Orthodox Church. And the awesome thing is that year by year, it just gets reinforced more and more, doesn't it? Like, you're like, oh, okay. And even I'm still just like, oh yeah, why do I always forget that we have, like the Triodion? Why do we always forget that? But like, it's still being reinforced after 20 years. Like, and that's the beauty of the church, is it's like, if you don't get it this year, you'll get it the next year, right? Maybe you'll get it 2 years from now, 10 years from now. And that's, it's so wonderful to see, like you're going to be around, right? Like, the Orthodox Church isn't going anywhere. And if you're not going anywhere, then that's wonderful. Like, you've got time. so there's no need to, I think one thing that we can do in our Western mindset is just, and especially we have information at our fingertips now, which just is a huge game changer. But, we just want to, get all the information. We want to do everything right. And we just give me I don't know, just give me the information, and I'll do it. Just give me the information, and I'll do it. And it's like, it's really not that simple. It's like, I can give you the information, but it with the church and with the Eastern mindset, and when it comes to learning and things like that, it's like, this is ongoing. And it can't just be, it's not just book knowledge. It's not just, it's a wonderful start. It's an absolutely wonderful start, but like, Orthodox praxis, like, it's something you have to live out. Like, it's not just here, it's here, and not always fun, and it's not always glamorous, and it's not always, um, it's we see that throughout all the lives of the saints, throughout the gospel, just like it's not fun. Like it's not always fun, once the newness of things wear off, it's just like, but it is there grace? Absolutely. And that's what and that's what it's all about, like just stay the course and fight the good fight and be inspired and cling to Christ and the lives of the saints and the Theotokos. And yeah, and we can kind of think, I can fall into the temptation of thinking, well, I kind of know everything now. It's like, oh my goodness, like I sort of I get the gist. I know, even with my, you go to confession, like I know what my spiritual father is going to say. It's like no, like that's where we can get caught up sometimes. Like, okay, I know this already, but it's like, no, God usually has a way of bringing us back and humbling us and showing us that the new depths of Him and the new depths of ourselves and what we need to work on. Like there's no end to it, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So yeah, I say that all as encouragement, hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, that is a lovely place to conclude for
I'm
today,
sorry, 105. Yeah.
Presbytera Kathryn.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Max. Have a great day. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out that episode of the Orthodox Christian Podcast. If you want to check out Presbytera Kathryn's work, there is a link in the video description. If you have a question about Orthodox Christianity, there is also a link to a Google form. And if you got any kind of value out of this episode, I would appreciate it if you passed it on to one friend or family member. And in the meantime, I hope that you have a peaceful week. Take care.